The easier to understand version of The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, as retold by Sara Simpson. Chapter 9. It has been 2 years since the day I found Gatsby's dead body in the pool. In the days after Gatsby's death, police, photographers, and newspapermen came in and out of Gatsby's house. The police tried to keep people away, but kids from town who heard about the murder and were curious figured out they could sneak in to see the pool by going through my yard. The newspapers told lots of stories about Gatsby that weren't true just so they could sell more papers. One story was that Wilson thought his wife was having an affair. The part about the affair was true, but I knew Gatsby wasn't the person she was sleeping with. I thought the truth was going to come out. However, Catherine, Myrtle's sister, told the newspaper that this rumor wasn't true and that Myrtle and her husband had been very happy together. Catherine told them that Myrtle had never even met Gatsby. In the end, the newspaper said that George Wilson was so upset about his wife's death that he lost his mind and killed Gatsby for no reason. After Gatsby died, I ended up making phone calls and planning the funeral. There wasn't anyone else willing to do it. I felt bad for Gatsby, so I decided to do whatever I could to help. 30 minutes after I found Gatsby's body, I called Daisy. She wasn't home. The butler said that Tom and Daisy left town earlier that day. They didn't say where they were going or how long they would be gone. Next, I called Meyer Wolfsheim's office. It was after 5 p.m. when I called, so nobody answered. The next morning, I sent a letter to Meyer Wolfsheim to tell him that Gatsby was dead. Wolfsheim sent a letter back right away. Dear Mr. Carraway, I am so upset to hear about what happened. I wish I could come, but I am very busy with important work right now. If there's something I can do later, just let me know. Let me know about the funeral. I don't know anything about his family. Yours truly, Meyer Wolfsheim. 3 days after Gatsby died, a letter came from Minnesota from someone named Henry C. Gatz. It was Gatsby's father. He was coming to West Egg and wanted to make sure we didn't have the funeral until he got there. When Mr. Gatz came, he was a very serious old man. He was wearing a cheap, worn-out coat. He was an alcoholic. I could tell by looking at his watery eyes and his messy gray beard. Mr. Gatz almost fell over when he got to the house. I tried to get him to eat something, but he wouldn't. He couldn't even drink the milk I got him. His hand was shaking so badly that he spilled it. I read that Jimmy was dead in the newspaper, Mr. Gatz said. I came as soon as I heard. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't know how to reach you to tell you. I took Mr. Gatz into the living room to see the body. He was upset, but not surprised. I took Mr. Gatz upstairs to one of the bedrooms. I told him I hadn't made any decisions about the funeral. I was waiting for him to get there. I didn't know what you'd want to do, Mr. Gatsby, I said. I thought maybe you'd want to take his body back to Minnesota. My name is Gatz, not Gatsby, he said. Jimmy liked it better here. He wouldn't want me to bury him in Minnesota. Were you and my boy friends, Mr. Carraway? We were close friends, I said. It was a lie, but I didn't feel like telling him Gatsby didn't really have any friends. Jimmy had a big future in front of him, Gatz said. He was young, but he was smart. If he lived, he'd have been someone important. He'd have helped build up the country. Mr. Gatz obviously didn't know that his son had made all of his money illegally. He thought Gatsby had been a businessman. I didn't want to tell him the truth and upset him, so I just agreed with him. The phone rang. It was Klipspringer, the man who had stayed at Gatsby's house for so long that people called him the Boarder. I thought he was calling to tell me he was coming to Gatsby's funeral. He wasn't. The only reason he called was because he had left a pair of shoes at Gatsby's house and he wanted someone to send the shoes to him. I was so angry that I hung up on him. On the morning of Gatsby's funeral, I went to New York to talk to Meyer Wolfsheim. I went to his office. The receptionist told me that Wolfsheim was out of town and that I should go away. Please tell him that Mr. Carraway is here to see him, I told the girl. I know he's here. I'm a friend of Gatsby's. When I said Gatsby's name, the girl was happy to help me. She went and got Wolfsheim. He took me into his office. I remember when I first met Gatsby, Wolfsheim said. He just got out of the army, and he had a bunch of medals from the war. He was so poor that he had to keep wearing his army uniform because he couldn't afford to buy regular clothes. The first time I saw him was at a pool room asking for a job. He hadn't eaten in a couple of days. I told him to have lunch with me. He ate $4 worth of food in 30 minutes. That was a lot. Did you get Gatsby started in business? I asked. Start him? I made him, Wolfsheim said. I raised him up out of nothing, right out of the gutter. He looked and talked like a fine gentleman, and when he told me he went to Oxford, I knew I could use him good. Right away, he did some work for a client of mine up in Albany. We were close, always together. Gatsby's dead now, I said. You were his closest friend, so I know you'll want to come to his funeral this afternoon. Wolfsheim looked like he might cry, but he didn't. I wish I could come, Wolfsheim said, but I can't get mixed up in it. When a man gets killed, I keep away. If I was still a young man, I would go, but now that I'm older, I have to stay away from problems. He wasn't going to come to the funeral. I stood up to leave. Let us learn to show our friendship for a man when he is still alive, and not after he is dead, Wolfsheim said. When I left Wolfsheim's office, the sky was dark and it was starting to rain. I went back to my house and changed clothes to go to the funeral. I went next door to Gatsby's house. His father was waiting for me. He wanted to show me something. Jimmy sent me this picture, Gatz said, taking a photo out of his wallet and showing it to me. It was a photo of Gatsby's house. Had he come to see you lately? I asked. He come out to see me 2 years ago, Gatz said. He bought me the house I live in now. We didn't talk for a while when he ran away from home. I was mad at him, but he had big plans. He was good to me after he made his money. Mr. Gatz put the photo of his house back into his wallet. He pulled a copy of the book Hopalong Cassidy out of his pocket. It was a book about a cowboy's adventures that Gatsby had when he was a boy. Look what he wrote in here, Gatz said. See? It shows you what big plans he had. Gatz opened the book and turned to the back cover. Inside the cover, a young Gatsby had written, Schedule, September 12, 1906. 6 a.m. Wake up. 6:15 to 6:30 a.m. Exercise with weights. 7:15 to 8:15 a.m. Study how electricity and other sciences work. 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Work. 4:30 to 5 o'clock p.m. Play sports. 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. Practice public speaking. 7 to 9 p.m. Study needed inventions. Goals. 1. No more wasting time hanging around the malt shop. 2. No more smoking or chewing tobacco. 3. Bathe every other day. 4. Read one magazine or book every week. 5. Save $5, scratch, $3 every week. 6. Be nicer to my parents. I found this in his old things by accident, Gatz said. See, it shows you how bad he wanted to make something of himself. Jimmy was always making lists like that. He wanted a better life. One time, he told me I ate like a pig. I beat him for that. A little before 3 p.m., the minister came to the house to start the funeral. Gatz and I both looked out the window to see if anyone else was coming. We waited 30 minutes. Nobody came. At about 5 p.m., we drove to the cemetery. It was rainy and dark. The minister, me, 4 of Gatsby's servants, and the mailman stood in the rain. As we stood there, another car pulled up. It was the man with the owl-eyed glasses I met in the library the first night I went to Gatsby's 3 months ago. I hadn't seen Owl Eyes since that night. I didn't even know his real name. I tried to concentrate on remembering Gatsby, but all I could feel was anger at Daisy. She hadn't sent a message or even some flowers. The funeral ended and we all went to our cars. I'm sorry I didn't make it to the house before the cemetery, Owl Eye said. Nobody else made it either, I said sadly. Seriously? Owl Eyes asked, surprised. Hundreds of people went to his parties every weekend. That poor son of a bitch. I can't believe no one cared enough to come. After everything that happened back east with Gatsby, I started to appreciate my home in the Midwest. I was homesick for the cold, snowy winters and for people who knew me. I knew the towns were boring compared to New York, and the houses were not as beautiful as the ones in East and West Egg, but there was something kinder and more honest about the Midwest. After everything that had happened with Gatsby, I just wanted to go home. That fall after Gatsby died, I left West Egg and went back home. Before I left, however, I knew I had to see Jordan Baker one more time. I had to end our relationship in person. I met her for drinks. She was wearing golf clothes. I talked about everything that had happened. She just sat there and listened. When I was done talking, she told me that she was engaged to another man. She was lying, but I pretended I didn't know and acted surprised to hear the news. For a minute, I wondered if I was making a mistake breaking up with her, but I knew I was doing the right thing. I stood up to go. "Whatever else happened, you did break up with me," Jordan said. "You broke up with me over the phone. I don't care anymore, but I'd never had anything like that happen to me before." I was upset for a while. We shook hands. "Do you remember that conversation we had that one time about driving a car?" Jordan said. "Not really," I said. "You said a bad driver was only safe until she met another bad driver." "Well, I met another bad driver, didn't I? It was careless of me not to see you the way you really are. I thought you were an honest person. That was something you bragged about." "I'm 30, I said. "I'm too old to lie to myself and call it honor." Jordan didn't answer me. I left her standing there. I was half angry with her and half still in love with her. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after Gatsby's funeral, I saw Tom in New York. He was walking in front of me on the sidewalk. I tried to slow down so he wouldn't see me and want to talk, but he saw me. He walked back and tried to shake my hand. I wouldn't shake hands with him. "What's the matter, Nick? Do you object to shaking hands with me?" Tom said. "I don't want to shake your hand. You know what I think of you," I said. "You're crazy as hell, Nick," Tom said. "I don't know what's wrong with you." "I want to know what you said to George Wilson that afternoon that made him decide to shoot Gatsby and himself," I said coldly. Tom didn't answer me. I started to walk away, then Tom grabbed me by my arm. "I told Wilson the truth," Tom said. "He came to our house when we were getting ready to leave town. I had the butler tell him that we weren't there, but he wouldn't leave. He had a gun in his pocket. Wilson would have shot me if I hadn't told him who owned the yellow car. So I told him it was Gatsby's. So what? Gatsby deserved to die. He ran over Myrtle and didn't even stop his car." I knew what he was saying wasn't true. "It's not like I didn't suffer," Tom said. "When I went back to the apartment I kept for Myrtle in the city and saw the box of dog biscuits sitting there, I cried like a baby." I couldn't forgive Tom or like him, but I could tell that he believed every word he was saying. It was pointless to try to get him to take responsibility for what he did. He didn't think he had done anything wrong. They were careless people, Tom and Daisy. They smashed up things and creatures and then retreated back into their money or their vast carelessness or whatever it was that kept them together, and let other people clean up the mess they had made. In the end, I shook Tom's hand. It seemed silly not to. It was like talking to a child. He wasn't able to understand what he had done. I wasn't any better than Tom. I couldn't pretend to be honest anymore. On my last night in West Egg, I looked at Gatsby's house. It was empty, and the grass was long and full of weeds. Someone, probably one of the neighborhood kids, had written a bad word on the front steps in chalk. I wiped the writing away. Then I went down to Gatsby's beach and laid on the sand in the moonlight. It was quiet now. As I lay there, I thought about how Gatsby probably felt the very first time he looked across the water and saw the green light on Daisy's dock. He must have felt like his dreams were finally coming true. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch our arms farther, and one fine morning. So we beat on, boats against the current, borne ceaselessly into the past.
Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe and click on the link for more resources from Enraged2Engaged.